Hi, welcome to the Brush and Bolt Gun. Today we're going to be doing a quick video on how to paint up an Ork Painboy. Okay, so what we have here is the Ork Painboy kit for Warhammer 40,000. Now, it's a great model. It's got all like the bionic eyes. There's loads of syringes and stuff like that on there, so there's plenty of details that we can do on this to make it look really, really good. The first thing that we're going to be doing though is doing his skin. So to start off, we're going to be using Waagh flesh. We're just going to give both the Ork and the Goblin a coat of this. He's previously been given a spray coat of Caliban green just as an undercoat, and that's just so that if you miss any of the colours that you're putting onto him, there's going to be a dark background colour there, and because there's lots of details on his flesh, it's likely that a bit of skin may be missed. So you spray it with the green, that covers up any bits that you might not get with your brush. When we come back, we'll have all the Waagh flesh finished. Now I'm just going to be doing the shade on the grot skin. For that I'm going to be using Drakenhof Nightshade. That just gives it a slightly different look to the Ork skin once I start doing that. Like so. Now we're just going to do the shade on the Ork skin, and that's going to be Athonian Camoshade. I like using this one for the shade on the skin. Previously when I've painted Orks, I'll put one up a bit later. I did the skin a lot brighter colours, so it's basically just a dark base coat, then Goblin green, so it's like a really, really old way of painting Ork skin. But now that I've started using shades a lot more, I found that Athonian Camoshade gives it a nice, almost like a natural shade to the green. When we come back, we'll have all the Athonian Camoshade finished. Okay, next we're going to be using just a little bit more Waagh flesh, and that's just to put the skin colour back on, making sure you leave some of the shades in the recesses. When we come back, we'll have all the Waagh flesh finished. Now that the shade's dried, I've just added a little bit of Vallejo White to the Waagh flesh, and we're just going to use that to highlight all the skin on both the Ork and the Goblin. The great thing about the Orks is they have loads of detail on the faces. They always have great expressions too, so always take your time when you're doing the faces. When we come back, we'll have all this layer done. Okay, so you can see the difference in the skin there, with the Orks being a nice green colour and the Goblins having that blue tinge. So what we're going to do now is just add a little bit more white to the mix, and then we're just going to do one final highlight on the skin. When we come back, we'll have all this final highlight done. With the skin finished, we're now going to move on to Citadel Xandri Dust, and that is going to be, just to do his trousers, I'm just going to build them up into a light cream colour. As always, if you put one layer of paint on and the previous colour shows through, just go back, give it another layer, just so you've got a nice smooth colour. When we come back, we'll have all the Xandri Dust finished. Now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Leadbelcher, and that's going to be to do a lot of the metallic parts, the blades and that kind of thing. When we come back, we'll have all the Citadel Leadbelcher done. Next we're going to be using Vallejo Model Air Chrome. I'm going to be using that to do some of the buckles, a couple of these syringes and a few other little bits of metal on them. When we come back, we'll have all the Vallejo Model Air Chrome finished. The next colour is going to be Skullcrusher Brass. When we come back, we'll have all the Skullcrusher Brass finished. Now we're going to be using Vallejo Black. You can use any black for this really, and it's just going to be to do his boots and any of these syringes or vials about his body. Like so. Now we're using Vallejo White. We're going to be using that to do his apron. When we come back, we'll have all of the white finished. Now we're going to move on to Seraphim Sepia. That's just going to be to do his trousers and the bandage on his arm. Like so. Now we're just going to use some Drakenhof Nightshade. That's going to be to shade the wristband and the trousers on the grot. Like so. Now we're just going to be using Agrax Earthshade again. We're just going to be putting some weathering and sort of like corrosion onto the blades and the metal parts. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Zandri dust, and that's just to work on his trousers again, put some of the colour back to them. I've added a little bit of white to the German cam bright green. I'm just going to do highlight on each of the lenses. Now this is using the same technique. We've got a post on the blog about painting lenses. It's using exactly the same technique as that, where you want to be doing the bottom half of the lens highlighted. So you're highlighting the bottom of the lens, then we're going to add a little bit more white to it to add another highlight to almost the bottom quarter. And we're just going to use pure white to add a little spot to the top of the lenses. I'm just going to add a little edge of white to this lens, like so. And Around the model there's a fair few vials and syringes and stuff, so I'm just going to paint up one of them and then we'll transfer that over and do that on the rest of them. So we're going to be using German Cam Bright Green again, so you want to be getting base colour for the liquid so it's running horizontal with the ground. Added some white to the German Cam Bright Green that we used on his lens. We're just going to do a few little highlights in the liquid. Just going to do one final little highlight on that in the form of little bubble shapes. And all we're going to do now is add a few little spots of white to represent reflections on the liquid and on the vial itself. And a few vertical streaks. Like so. Now we're just going to repeat that process with a few different colours, and then when we come back we'll have all the vials done. We're going to be highlighting the black now, and to do that we're going to be using Vallejo German Grey. Like so. You can see I've done all the vials and the syringes, so we've got all the reflections on there. Now I want to leave a few of the tubes, so like the black rubber hose, but I want to make a few of them so that they've got the colour of the liquid in them. So the first one I'm going to do is this tube going down here. I'm going to do it in the same style as I did the syringes, so it's just going to be sections of red where the liquid is, and then we're going to highlight with a bit of white and a bit of pink just to get it looking nice. When we come back we'll have all the Mephiston Red done. We're just going to use a little bit of white mixed to Mephiston Red. We're going to highlight this tube. Like so. Now I'm just going to highlight that tube using a little bit of white. When we come back we'll have all of this highlight done. Next we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Nihilakh Oxide. We're just going to add a little bit of corrosion and weathering to the bronze coloured areas. Like so. As we move on to the final stages for this, I'm going to start doing the weathering and corrosion. I'm going to start with Typhus Corrosion, and that's going to be just to add a little bit of rust. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Citadel Ryza Rust, and that's going to be to add a little bit of an orange tint to all those bits that we've just put Typhus Corrosion on. When we come back, we'll have all the Ryza rust finished. Before we add the blood and the gore to them, we're going to be using Astro Granite Debris, which is one of Citadel's texture paints. We're going to be using that just to cover his base, to give it a nice rough coating, like grey, gravel kind of stuff. Now, if you've not used the texture paints before, they're quite thick, so I tend to use a sculpting tool or whatever you've got to hand to put it onto the base. Once it's there, you can use an old brush to spread it around. Using the same old brush that we used to put the Typhus Corrosion on, we're just going to spread this about. You don't have to make sure it's even or anything like that, just as long as it's all the base is covered. Anything that's on the sides you can always scrape off once it's dry. Once you've got the base coated with the texture paint, just leave that to dry, and then when we come back we'll finish it off. Now prior to this we've washed the base in Citadel Nuln Oil, and now that that's dried we're going to work on the highlights. Next colour is going to be Mechanicus Standard Grey. We're going to be using that to re-highlight the rubble on the base. So you just want to kind of give that a bit of a wet brushing. You don't need too much on a brush. It doesn't matter if you put too much in certain areas or too little in other areas. We'll be doing another highlight over the top. It should look fine either way. Like so. Next highlight that we're going to do on that is just using Vallejo London Grey. That's just a lighter shade that'll just give a nice final highlight to the base. Like so. Okay, so if you want to keep him clean, you can just leave him as he is. You don't need to do anything further on that. But if you do want to add a bit of gore, I'm just going to use a bit of Carroburg Crimson and then Blood for the Blood God to add a bit of spatter to him. When we come back we'll have all the Carroburg Crimson done. Okay, now we've got a bit of discoloration on his apron and on his weapons. We're now just going to use a little bit of Blood for the Blood God, the Citadel technical one. That's just to add a bit of shiny gore to all his stuff. When we come back, we'll have all the Blood for the Blood God finished, and I'll show you the finished Ork. As always, there is one last final thing to do, and that's just add a little bit of glass varnish to the vials and syringes. I'll just give them a shine like glass so that once your figure's done, they'll have a natural shine to them as well as the shine that you've painted on. Now, if you are going to varnish your miniature with like a matte varnish, it's always worth putting on the gloss varnish afterwards. I'm just putting it on now just to demonstrate it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel below so you don't miss any future content, and also think about subscribing to our other social media linked below. Now, I'm going to be trying to do a few more Ork videos in the next couple of weeks. Some of them maybe just doing a little bit of like maybe how to do the skin, how to do the weapons, that kind of thing, but hopefully getting a few more miniatures up there as well. Thanks very much.